Yes,
Brother
can you?
man, good morning.
Good morning.
Good night. It is. Thank you so much for being with me on this very first podcast that I'm organizing, and with the able support of my daughter. And we are
Thank you.
so pleased to have you with us, indeed.
Yes.
And I just want to point out to people that uh, Dr. Maulana Karenga is professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California State University, Long Beach. He is chair of the National Association of Kawaida Organizations. He is the executive director of the African American Cultural Center and the Kawaida Institute of Pan-African Studies. This is Dr. Maulana Karenga, our brother, who's been with us for many conversations like this, and very much a leader in the national and even international community. He is also the author of numerous scholarly articles and books, including Kawaida and Questions of Life and Struggle. Is one of the places where we want to start this conversation. Mayat, the moral ideal and in ancient Egypt, a study in classical in ethics, selections from the Hausa. He is He is the introduction. He has authored Introduction to Black Studies of the fourth edition, and Udu Ife, the ethical teachers. Dr. Karenga, as many people know, and the general public is fully aware that he is the person who created and developed Kwanzaa holiday, and
Nguzo Saba.
yeah, and you know I've been saying that for years,
Okay.
and he is also the subject of a new book by. He is the subject of the book by Dr. Molefe Asante, entitled Maulana Karenga, an Intellectual Portrait. And finally, Dr. Karenga is currently writing a major work on El Hajj Malik and Malcolm X, entitled The Liberation of Ethics of El Hajj Malcolm X, Critical Consciousness, Moral Grounding, and Transformative Struggle.
Jeez.
And you know, and Doctor, that's really where I want to begin. When you talk about ethics and formative struggle, uh, what is really important is what you have teaching us for uh, throughout our careers. Really, has been your commitment to morality, ethics,
Hmm.
and one of the things that we're dealing with right now is, and there are a couple of those topics in here that I really want to talk about, but this a good place to start is at the leader the leadership currently in our community. Uh, is there's some in this country at this moment there is a lack of ethics for sure. If this but how do we begin, as particularly in our own community, in the Black community, how do we begin in our own community to what it seems to be a need for a newer kind of uh, leadership based on morality and we've got people now who whose leadership is often questionable. And how do we begin? How do your feelings about where we start, where we are right now, as creating a new kind of commitment to integrity in our own community.
Mm-hmm. Asante, thanks so much, Bob. It's good to see you. And I wanted to just say on behalf of my organization, the African American Culture Center, us and its advocates, thank you so much for this invitation and opportunity to share with you a discussion on critical issues facing us as African people and doing it from an African-centered perspective. We send you all warm greetings of solidarity and continued struggle. And we say to you, as the ancestors taught us, continue to struggle, keep the faith, and hold the line. And so when we talk about how do we go forward, it's three fundamental issues: identity, purpose, and direction. So if we're going to talk ethics, then we have to talk about an ethical conception of ourselves. Who are we? Who are we, right? And we must see ourselves in terms of what our ancestors have taught us, that we are a moral and social vanguard in this country. And we prove it by the struggle we waged, which has not only benefited us, but expanded the realm of freedom and justice in this country and became a model and mirror for struggling and oppressed people all over the world who borrowed our moral vocabulary and our moral vision and posed our struggle as a model to emulate. So we have to do that. This goes back a long ways when Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune said to us, and I say Nana, Dr. Mary McLeod. Nana, of course, is an honorific term. She said, we are heirs and custodians of a great legacy. And we say, therefore, we must bear the burden of that legacy with strength, dignity, and determination. And we have to see ourselves as a resilient people that are committed to a struggle, right? That's our purpose, to bring good into the world, to struggle against all forms of oppression, to maintain our own integrity when things are falling apart around us. And then the direction. So we have identity, we have purpose. Our purpose is to bring good into the world, to expand the realm of freedom and justice in this world, right? And to build a caring and inclusive good. We're always struggling for African and human good and the well-being of the world and all in it. And how do we do that? By righteous and relentless struggle and the radical refusal not to be defeated, not to walk away from the struggle until the war is won. So I think it's very important for us to see ourselves that. And sometimes we are, as you know, Bob, living in dangerous, difficult, and demanding time. And there's a tendency to despair and to want to, walk away from it or go out the country. But these people will follow us wherever we go. If they even let us out the country, they might take our passport, like W.B. Du Bois, Nana W.E.B. Du Bois, and Nana Paul Robeson. They might just take our thing, right? Lock us up on trumped up charges they've done throughout the years. Rescue me if I'm wrong, right? And so what we have to do is remember this concept of ourselves as an unbreakable people, right? Audaciously asserting ourselves for good, African and human good in the well-being of the world. And I want to say the three fundamental identities I like from our history. The first one is by Nana Howard Thurman, who says to us, we are people who ride the storm and remain intact. Second, the identity from Nana Gwen Brooks, who says we are people that conduct our blooming even in the noise and whip of the whirlwind. And finally, the teachings from Nanny Bearers, who say to us, we are people who specialize in the wholly impossible. So if we remember that and continue to struggle, keep the faith, hold the line, then we become a model and mirror, not only for ourselves, but also for each other. And this last point, we have to take the position that Dr. Martin Luther King said to us when he assumed leadership of the Montgomery Improvement Association and then stepped on the stage to be a noble witness for us around the world. He said, let us so struggle. This is the ethical idea. Let us so struggle that years from now, historians will have to say, there lived a great people, a Black people, who through their struggle injected a new meaning and morality in the veins of civilization. This is our challenge and overwhelming responsibility.
One of the things that uh, we're we're dealing with local organizations, people that we're working with around the community, is that there's the a tendency to allow leadership, not just any particular individual, but there's a tendency to allow people to be less than we are in that we need. We let people work with us in our local organizations. We have people who say that we should let the leader not do a excellent job because the white guy doesn't do an excellent job. Therefore, why should we give the our leader or our person? I'm trying not to identify any particular person nationally here, but there are
No,
people.
we don't have to because the lesson is general,
Right,
right? And
right,
we don't want to end up talking pathology all the time about our people.
right,
We have to talk about problems that we face, not simply as Africans, but as African Americans. And
right,
we are American by habit and African by choice. And a lot of times we adopt the values of the dominant society and forget our own identity. That's why I say the three things are important to keep in mind,
right,
that we are an African people, that we are a moral and social vanguard. And we got to hold to that, and that we're struggling righteously and relentlessly to bring good into the world, right? And to not let any good be lost, as our sacred texts tell us. So that's very important. We can't we can't ever let our oppressor be our teacher. We can't even let our allies be our tutor. We
mm,
must, as a second principle in the Nguzo Saba, the seven principles, say we must define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. We must do that. If we don't do that, who are we?
mm,
One of the things that Dr. W. Du Bois had said at on the cusp of winning the victories in the civil rights phase of the Black freedom movement, right? Is that he said, I'm afraid that we're so in such a hurry to integrate into American society that we'll take it as it is rather than shaping it as it ought to be. And then we'll find ourselves feeling closer to Germany than to Africa. And so I
mm,
think it's very important for us to remember that we don't lose our, 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 our conception of ourselves, our will to struggle in trying and treacherous times. And when we talk of trying and treacherous time, we're speaking of times that would test to the limit our moral courage and commitment, our will to struggle for the good, even after calculating the awesome cause, and our radical refusal to be defeated, always put forward. So, in these turning point times and struggles, Bob, like these and those yet to come, in this emergence of fascism and racism mixed together, we must not find ourselves paralyzed with anxiety and apprehension, or pining over the terrible turn of event, or the odds against us, or the toll these righteous struggles for our lives and our future and the future of this country would take on us. And rather, we must remember and hold high the instructive, rich, and rewarding lessons of our history learned in real life, and lived experiences, continuous striving, and righteous and relentless struggle. And we must reason, and this is important to me, we must reason and realize if our honored ancestors in the Holocaust of enslavement could hold on to their humanity, hold on to their hope, and strive for freedom and find various ways and means to resist, and embody a radical and irreversible refusal to be defeated or despaired, we can, in good faith, do no less in this winter of vengeance and violence promised by this right wing regime, goose stepping and stomping into
mm.
power.
Absolutely. Indeed, indeed. Let me just say again, we're talking with Dr. Maulana Karenga, and Dr. Karenga is the professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California State University, Long Beach. He is the chair of the organization. He is the chair of the organization US and the National Association of Kawaida Organizations. The general public, very, very familiar of him as the creator of the African American cultural holiday Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba, the seven principles, and he is with us on for this. This is my first effort at a podcast. It's,
Gee,
we're kind of working this all
yeah.
together and this out. And I'm so pleased to have my brother, Dr. Maulana Karenga, as the person who launches this podcast with me.
And I'm honored and pleased to be here. And thanks again for the invitation and opportunity to
So
continue our ongoing dialogue.
let me just ask you this. Um, uh, I have a concern for how we move from and with your lens, moving from, for my sake, moving from protest to power. We have come from a tradition of protest. So many things that we have done, almost many of the things have been protests. We have marched in Selma. We marched in Washington at the Lincoln Memorial. You know, the March on Washington. We've had a number, even the work that we have done with the anti-violence work, which has been some good work, but it has always been rooted in protest, not necessarily has it begun to focus on self-determination. Okay, I want to. Can we talk a little bit? Talk a bit about uh, the importance, or your lens on protest, and I'm saying protest versus self-determination.
Okay. So I might not make that same division. What I do want to do, though, is respond to what you said, which is real. And I just wanted to rephrase it in the Kawaida language. And I'm
Mhm.
doing this because, as you know, in my philosophy, Kawaida, which is an ongoing synthesis, we hope, of the best of Africans' sensibilities, thought, and practice in constant exchange with the world, we try to develop both a new logic and language for how to talk about ourselves and about our struggle. So, what I want to do here is to say what we're dealing with, Bob, I think, is the ethics of resistance and the practice of resistance. And I want to define resistance in a way beyond, as you said, protest or just opposition. Usually, when we think of resistance, we just think about opposing. We got to oppose. We got to oppose domination, deprivation, and degradation, which is how the dominant society relates to us, right? This system of racism, systemic racism, a pathological system that is not only pathological, but actually also pathogenic. Not only is it sick itself pathological, but it's pathogenic in that it produces sick people, both physically and mentally. So we've got to oppose that. We've got to oppose and struggle against all forms of oppression, savage and subtle. And we engage both savage and subtle at the same time in America. That's our history right here, right? From the Holocaust of enslavement, just outright genocidal campaigns against us, to the savagery of segregation, and to now the practice of racism openly under the color and camouflage of law. That's what we've got to deal with, right? So we got to resist that. But resistance is three things: it is opposition, it is affirmation, and it is aspiration. So I told you about opposition to oppression, and that is to say, domination, deprivation, and degradation of us and other people. And then the second thing is, of course, affirmation is what you're moving toward. How do we affirm ourselves? Now, that's what they're doing. But how do we speak of and think of ourselves? How do we define ourselves? Except in the dignity affirming, life enhancing, and world preserving ways our ancestors taught us. That's what and we must build institutions. This is what you're leading to, because there's no serious enduring culture that can practice self determination without the building institution structures that are permanent and ongoing, that house and advance our interests. And believe me, there is no substitute for a people that is aware, organized, and engaged in a multiplicity of activities to define, defend, and advance their interests. And they must have institutions to do that. They must practice a self determination that builds internally a capacity to even resist the oppressor and to build a new future, which brings us to aspiration. We got to aspire for another way of being human in this world than the Europeans present to us. We're African people. We're the oldest people in the world. We're the elders of humanity. We're the fathers and mothers of humanity and human civilization, right? We're the sons and daughters of the Holocaust of enslavement. We're the authors and heirs of our reaffirmation of our Africanness and our social justice and radical resistance history of the 60s. So, what does that mean to us? It said building our own, building the space we occupy, holding on to it, and developing and aspiring for good and inclusive good for everybody. That's why I always like to stress from an ethical point that our struggle, we can't leave ourselves out. I'm not going to talk about humanity and leave us out, right? So we're struggling for African and human good and the well-being of the world and all in it. And believe me, this has always been in our struggle, but we have not made it in the forefront. This struggle for a good and safe world, where we don't have seasons out of seasons. We don't have the flood. We don't have summer and winter. We don't have the climate changes just getting ready to continue to bring massive destruction in the world because people are irresponsible because of rapacious and vulturine capitalism. We've got to struggle against that. We got to affirm our future. Nana Fanon says, let us reconsider the question of humanity. Let us see if we, as African people, can introduce a new man and a new woman and a new history for humankind. Can we make alliances that are based on three principles? This is us from Kawida. Three principles: mutual respect, mutual support, and mutual benefit. We have no business in an alliance where there's not mutual respect, where there's not mutual support, and where there's not mutual benefit. So that's what we talk about. That's how I think, Bob, we can turn from simple protest, quote unquote, with simple resistance as opposition to resistance as opposition, affirmation, and aspiration for a good and beautiful world of inclusive good.
Mm, mm. It is. It is important for us to be clear, as you have always taught, the ethics, the morality, that is what we learn from you, all of our lives. And I appreciate what you teach, and I appreciate how you are teaching it and how important it is. There are challenges that are facing us then at this point. There are challenges right now. Maybe maybe we might need to walk through some of that again. You kind of already addressing it, but maybe we need to just kind of walk through it a little bit. What those challenges might be more specific as we start moving ahead. Dr. King also said that what was his book with chaos from chaos to community, and that is where we are even now. What are the challenges that are in front of us that we maybe need to identify, as you teach the importance of morality and ethics and integrity, because my feeling still is that the integrity is where we really we want to focus. I think for a few minutes, we want to focus on integrity and how we can kind of start to make that clear to our people and those who might want to be take up that responsibility to provide leadership. There are a lot of people who, there are people that we're both aware of, the Nubian Leadership Council. There are people around the country with organizations, and they do want to provide leadership. They don't want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of the leadership, and so integrity, it becomes really important for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, appreciate what you said, if I understand correctly. So let's start with that. The whole idea, and then I want to tell you the steps I think are important. These are just some things that we need to do. We need to do a lot of things, but this is so. The first thing, if we're going to talk about leadership, which is key to what we're going to do at Advance, we have to define it. So, what is leadership? And the best of our tradition teaches us that leadership is a moral vocation. It has to be seen as a moral vocation, not an acquisition of power over or power to feather our own nest or power to lord over other people like our oppressor. We're not into that. Our power has to be power with the people, power for the people, power of the people, power for the people, power with the people, and power of the people. We have to keep that in mind. It's the love of our people that is a fundamental ground for the things we do in our community, in the society, and the world. And so if leadership is a moral vocation, then leadership is the self-conscious capacity and moral commitment to provide philosophy and principles that lead to practice that not only satisfy human needs, but transforms the people in the process, making them self-conscious agents of their own life and liberation. And so where do we go from here? Like you raised a question that, both Haji Malcolm and Dr. King raised these questions about where do we go from there? Haji Malcolm was in a conversation in Detroit to say, where do we go from here? And so did Nana Dr. King, who wrote the book, the article book, Where Do We Go From Here? Community Chaos. And so here's what I think. I'm saying this from my own experience and from my own teaching. At the core of Kawaida are the Nguzo Saba. Most people see these in Nguzo Saba 7 principles as just 7 principles of Kwanzaa, right? And they raise them doing Kwanzaa. But millions of people throughout the world African community on every continent in the world use these principles to ground themselves, to orient themselves, and to direct their lives toward good and expansive end. So I want to say these, and I want to tell you how I see us going forward with this. This is our challenge. Our first and foremost challenge is unity. And the reason that's such a problem, first, it's a principle, right? But it's also a practice. So unity has to be based on 3 things. First, principle. That's what you just said. You always talk, Bob. And when you talk about integrity, you talk about principle. You have no right to give allegiance to and support to people that are not principled and don't relate to you in principled ways and don't relate to the people in principled ways. This doesn't have to do with no current issues or anything. It's an ongoing issue. It's an enduring issue. It just doesn't happen when it happens in your city or mine. It happens all the time. There's a challenge to hold people to certain standards, right? And so we have to be careful, though, not to find ourselves sounding like our oppressor, right? We have to make this decision ourselves. The oppressor has no moral standing, right? Except in a general human sense. But in terms of telling us something or ruling somebody guilty, he's guilty. That's an obscenity for the oppressed to even charge the oppressed with anything, right? So I don't accept that. I ask myself, though, what is my standard? What is my standard, right? In the love of the people, treating the people right, speaking truth to the people, doing justice for the people, caring for the people, struggling for yourself, or in this month of martyrdom of Haji Malcolm, right? It means offering your life and your death, if necessary, for the advancement of the people. See, that's the leaders right there. That's a model, right? I don't expect everybody to do that, but we got to have that model. People are not going to practice all the 10 commandments all the time, every time. So they might not do all the 7 principles. The Buddhists might not do the Eightfold Path all the time. But you got to have standards. Otherwise, you couldn't do anything. So here's these 7 principles. The first one is umoja, unity in principle, purpose, and practice. So the principle is that we've got to tell the truth. Nana Fanulu Heyman said, the first thing we've got to do is to tell the truth. Stop lying about this country. Stop lying about ourselves. Stop lying about what we're doing and not doing, right? Be a truthful people. Present yourself. Don't present yourself like the oppressor with a Hollywood front, laughing, but got a lot of bombs and committing genocide in broad daylight and trying to discuss it as self-defense. Those kinds of things. We've got to be able to condemn that and make a distance between that. The other thing is purpose. What is our purpose except to bring good into the world? I'll get back to that later, right? To free ourselves so we can be ourselves, right? That's what we're trying to do. And I'll go again do that. And then practice. In the final analysis, Bob, you know and I know, practice proves and makes possible everything. No, we always say that no matter how many books you read on swimming, sooner or later, you got to jump in the water. So if you say you're a leader, you got to lead with integrity, with justice, with caring, right? With truth. And so practice proves and makes possible everything. Second principle, kujichagulia, self-determination. I said the first is umoja, unity. The second is kujichagulia, self-determination. And so we say in umoja, I should have said it, umoja, strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race, right? That's it. We're a world African community. And we got to always, as Haji Malcolm said, ask ourselves, where do we fit in the international scheme of things? Where do we fit in this world community? Second, kujichagulia, to self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves, but also build for ourselves. Right? Inherent in that creation is the building of these institutions, the building of these programs to deal with and to social forces to struggle for health care, right? For the people, housing for the homeless, right? A quality education for our children, reparations for our people, all those things, right? That's what we've got to define our issue. What is the issues, Bob, that we can all associate with in our self-determination? I decided self-determination is self-determining, self-choosing, right? So what are these issues? Now, I gave you some that everybody would agree with, but let's put them together and have them like we used to have: freedom, justice, equality, and power over our destiny daily life. That used to be our everybody, no matter whether you were Muslim or a Christian, whether you were a nationalist or just integration. People say, guess what? We need freedom. We need justice. We need equality, and we need power. And then the other one is Ujima, collective working responsibility, to build and maintain our community together and make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems and to solve them together. We got to care for each other. We got to have a caring community. We got to identify with each other. You see, one of the things I said about both Ujima and Umoja, unity and collective working and collective working responsibility. Guess what? If we say Black Lives Matter, we've got to stay Black for it to matter. We can't have 50 other identities. And one of the problems of Ujima and Umoja is we got a 50 other identity. We're not just Black. We start arguing about male and female, about gay, trans, all of that. Everybody, let's accept that. Let's struggle for everybody to have freedom. We're struggling for an inclusive good. But the central point of our organization, our orientation has to be Black. If Black lives matter, we've got to first concede Black. Then we talk about Black's diversity. All of other diversities you can have with white people. That's not one of them you can't have with white people. But you can only have Black with us. Only Black with Black people. Let's face it. So that's a starting point. So if you keep saying you're not Black and you this or that, that's why we can't get unified, why we can't do things. Come with your own interests, come with your personal identity, but don't forget your collective identity the larger struggle that must be weighed, because guess what? That is who we are. That's our history. Don't give up your legacy. And that's how the world understands you and engages you, right? So when the white man, the police, trails my brother, Elijah McClain in Aurora, this is a gentle brother. I always use him as an example. He said, look, I eat vegetables. I'm not even into no violence and stuff. But they killed him in spite of that. They didn't care what his age was, his gender was, his sexuality, his religion. None of that mattered, except he was black. And black is an indictment in a racist mind. Black is an indictment. But I don't want to be a community just because the white man's calling me names. Right? I'm a community before he existed. So I want to say there's something beautiful about us, something sacred and soulful and resilient and resourceful. And we've got to hold that and speak that special culture truth to the world. We're second to none. No one is more chosen than us. No more elite. No more elect than black people. No history is more sacred or holy than our own, right? We've got to take that position and we got to unite around the beauty of our peoplehood, the beauty and meaningfulness of our peoplehood and the history, the awesome history we have left and have created for the world. And then, of course, Ujamaa, you've always taught us, Bob, business. We've got to deal with the economics of our community. And what does Ujamaa say? To build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other business, and to profit from them together with two principles there: shared work and shared wealth. We build the wealth and we share it. We have to distinguish ourselves from the vulgarities of capitalism. We have to do a cooperative economic. However you come in the final analysis, that's going to be. One time we used to say this in the 60s, and some of our Marxist colleagues used to say, oh, Maulana, you're just trying to do this in capitalism and you can't do it. Now the Cubans are doing it. Now the Marxists are talking about it. See, I mean, just show you how history runs, right? Cooperatives. That was the fundamental. We did that in the Black Freedom Movement during the Civil Rights phase in the South. They had a lot of cooperatives that sustained them in ways that other things couldn't. We've got to have shared wealth. Even if other people have other things, at the core of what we're doing, we have to create the wealth together and share the wealth together. The next is NIA, purpose. We have to have a national vocation, right? What do we want as a people, right? And so we say, what is that? NIA said, to make as our collective vocation the building and development of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. But what is greatness? The Husia, the sacred text of ancient Egypt, tells us that the wise are known by their wisdom, but the great are known by their good deeds. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be great by doing good, by serving our people and serving the interests of humanity. That's what Dr. King means. He said everybody can be great because everybody can serve. All the great leaders, the religious leaders and the social leaders, whether you talk about Jesus or the Prophet Muhammad, or whether you talk about Haji Malcolm or Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, or Nana Harriet Tubman, or Nana Fannie Lou Hamer, all of these people, Haji Malcolm, all of these people are great because they served the people. They offered their life and their death for us, right? And all the great people did the same thing, right? So we know how to be great, and we have to take a serious moral position on that. Then, of course, we have Kumba creativity. We're a creative person. What is it? We say create, to do always as much as we can, in the way we can, in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited. And our community is not only this immediate community, but our world community is African, and our world community is human. In Swahili, I always teach this. We have two words for people. One is Watu, which means human being, and the other one is Walimwengu, which means world being. So we have to have a world consciousness about what we're doing. We can never forget ourselves now. We can't talk about humanity in the abstract or the world in the abstract. We're the humans, right? We're the first humans we got to deal with. As Nana Dr. W.B. Du Bois said, we start with ourselves. And from that, we learn about other human beings. So we're the first human beings we have to encounter. We have to read the life book of our own selves. That's what we have to do. And we have to be ourselves in order to free ourselves. And that creativity teaches us that we must emulate the creator. I was saying this is the month of the Black History Month theme given by Dr. Carter G. Woodson's organization, ASLA. It says, is African Americans in labor. And I point out in the article I'm writing for this week's Sentinel that we are the people who first talked about the protection of labor. In fact, the first recorded strike, labor strike, is in ancient Egypt, in Africa, right? And the people say to the officials, right, it's not just wages we're struggling for. This is a question of justice, right? A question of justice. And we have to do that. And I want us to see that we have to work our way on the world. And we emulate, I say this in my article, we emulate the creator who created the world. And so if we say, people say, I want to be like Jesus. So if people say, I want to be like Ra, or I want to be like Ola Dumari, these are African names for the divine or the creator, then what is distinguishing? And one of the beautiful things that is so evident in our history is that we create ways out of no ways.
Mhm.
We're way makers. We're openers of the ways, right? And so we create beauty even in the midst of ugliness. That's the beauty. And we can do that. Sometimes we're creative in the wrong areas, right? But we are still creative. And we have to take this creativity we have and make a whole new world. And this comes with the ancient Egyptian teaching of Suruj Ta, which means to repair, renew, and remake ourselves in the process and practice of repairing, renewing, and remaking the world. And finally, Imani, faith. And Imani says to believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, right? And in the righteousness and victory of our struggle. The righteousness and victory of our struggle. See? And we have to believe, right? We have to believe in ourselves. That's why I said the struggle has always been two things, Brother Bob. To the struggle to be ourselves and to free ourselves. And we can't free ourselves, as I said earlier, if we don't be ourselves. If we got 50 different identities except ourselves, that major core root, we can be all these others, but we have to keep the core, right? So we got to struggle to be ourselves and free ourselves from domination, deprivation, and degradation. But again, this aspiration, free ourselves so we can be ourselves, develop ourselves, flourish, and come into the fullness of ourselves. And with other oppressed and progressive people, dare to imagine a new world of inclusive good and to struggle relentlessly to bring it into being. And those things, all of the 7 principles I've talked about, stresses knowledge, stresses caring and commitment, ethical commitment, institution building, and righteous and relentless struggle. Righteous struggle. We're doing good in the world. When we against falsehood and fascism, when we're against injustice and oppression, that is knocking down what the Egyptians call isfat and bringing ma'at into being. Ma'at is truth and justice and rights, all the good things we bring in the Ire in the Ifa tradition, right? So the Ifa tradition said, let's do things with joy, Bob. The 78-1 said, let's do things with joy, for surely humans have been divinely chosen to bring good into the world. And we said, this is a fundamental mission and meaning of human life. So whether you are a podcaster or you're a preacher, whether you're a pharmacist or a farmer, a journalist or a judge, a student or a teacher, you are chosen to bring good into the world. And it says to increase good and not let any good be lost. We have a beautiful struggle. Nana Dr. King said it's a beautiful and bitter struggle. It's bitter because it costs a lot. There are unnecessary casualties, undeserved deaths, undeserved suffering. And that's why I said it takes courage, moral courage, to commit yourself to the struggle, to see it to the end, regardless of the awesome cost it would take on all of us. But we are a beautiful people. And I believe, as Nana Thurman said to us, we are people who have ridden the storm many times and remain intact. And as Nana Gwen Brooks said to us, we conduct our blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind. And as Nana Nan and Barris told us, we are people that specialize in the whole impossible. And this is our duty, Bob. This last thing is this: to know our history and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new world and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive ways.
Brother, thank you so much. Thank you for coming with me this first effort at a podcast. I appreciate my daughter here with me.
Peace.
She's nowhere near the camera, but she's pretty.
All greetings to her. Thank you.
And we're so pleased as we're working this out. And we are both, she and I are really very, very pleased. But would you have been teaching even here with this this broadcast? I'm still talking about broadcasts from my broadcasting days.
That's right.
As we move,
master broadcaster. You master broadcaster. Okay.
But, Dr. Maulana Karenga, thank you so much for being. Thank you for being with me. And we will continue these conversations. Everyone, thank you for joining us as well. Thank you for being a part of this Bob Law Now podcast, the first podcast done by Bob Law Now. Thank you again.